It is time that people in this continent realize that having visa restrictions amongst ourselves is working against us. Now, those were the exact words of President William Ruto of Kenya while making a keynote address at the Three Basins Climate Change Conference in Brazzaville, Congo. Now, he further said that by the end of this year, that is come 2024, no African country will need a visa to enter Kenya. The head of state said the move is aimed at boosting trade with African countries. Now, President Ruto stated that the low rate of intra-African trade urged to reduce customs traffic or tariffs rather within the African continent to accelerate the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, Kenya's decision to waive visa requirements for all African countries represents a pivotal moment in the quest for African unity and cooperation. But it is essential to understand the motivation behind this move and, of course, the challenges likely to be faced, as it may not be a walk in the park. Well, joining us to have this conversation, first, we're joined by Dr. XN Iraki, Associate Professor, University of Nairobi, all the way from Kenya. Thank you so much, Dr. Iraki, for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too. Thank you. Also joining us, we have Maina, Development Economist from Nairobi. Thank you, Anne, for joining us as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right, lady and gentlemen, let's go straight to the conversation. Dr. Iraki, I'm going to start with you. What would you say motivated Kenya or the president to undertake this ambitious endeavor? And what message exactly does it aim to convey to other African nations?
Good afternoon. I think since President Ruto became the president, he has always portrayed himself as a Pan-Africanist. And that's one reason why he is making sure that if you want to come to Kenya, you don't need a visa. So by making sure that you don't need a visa to visit Kenya from any African country, he's confirming he's Pan-Africanist. But he is also aware that if you open the borders by removing visas, you get more trade among the African countries. It is also in the spirit of African Free Trade Area. But more importantly, there's economic evidence that immigrants make very good entrepreneurs. So if you open the borders, if you make people come to your country without visas, you are probably to get more entrepreneurs, and the economy is likely to benefit. I think those are some of the reasons why he has decided to make sure that you don't need a visa to come to Kenya.
All right. Thank you for that, Dr. Iraki. Now, when we talk about foreign trade, traveling, border opening, one of the things that comes to our mind is the tourism sector of these countries. So, Anne, how exactly would you say that the removal of visa requirements from Kenya's travel from African countries will impact the country's tourism industry? What steps can be taken to ensure that there is a success in this move and it will not torpedo the tourism industry of Kenya?
The visa restriction removal, it obviously has its own advantages in terms of it boosts tourism. And you see, when tourism is doing good in an economy as a sector, it always reflects on the revenues of a country. And that, just like Dr. Iraki talked about, the economic growth is what is driving our president to act on these visa restrictions. And when this now happens, the economic growth is boosted by some of the sectors, for example, tourism, and in Kenya it happens to be one of the good performing sectors within the economy. So tourism will be boosted in such a way that there will be more international travelers, but it will not, it's restricted or constrained in a way that it does not torpedo the rest of the economy, given the restriction, the visa restriction removal.
Back to you, Dr. Iraki. Now we're talking about the visa-free policy, but it's important to note that more measures need to be taken to ensure that these policy does not now inadvertently enable illicit, movement of things and smuggling and stuff like that. So, what measures can the country, Kenya now, and other participating countries implement to facilitate seamless travel logistics and also enhance border security simultaneously?
Yeah, that's a major concern for every country that opens its borders, because when you remove visa restrictions, the first people to take advantage of that are not always businessmen and entrepreneurs. They're usually the bad guys, the criminals, the drug traffickers, and so on. So we assume that by the time the Kenyan government is removing visa restrictions, they have put security measures to make sure that whoever comes into the country is a person of good repute, is a person who has no criminal record, is a person who is going to contribute to the economic growth of the country. But one way to do that would be to make sure there is reciprocity, so that if Kenya is not demanding visas from Nigerians or from Liberians or for Moroccans, then the other way is also done. There is reciprocity, so that if I'm coming to Kenya from Morocco, from Zambia, or whichever country, we can get your travel information. We can get your criminal record. We can get your background information, so that when you come here, we are sure that you are a person who can be trusted. You are a person who is going to contribute to the economy. So if the two countries or the countries that have no visa restrictions can be able to cooperate in terms of sharing intelligence, I don't think we need to worry about that.
All right. I like that you did mention the issue of reciprocation. Now, Kenya, the president did announce that he did the same thing for DR Congo, and the country did reciprocate. So now there's no need for a visa, traveling between DR Congo and Kenya. Now, that will lead me to my next question, Anne. Do you think that this initiative will trigger a domino effect that will inspire other African countries to follow suit and eliminate the visa requirements among themselves? Bearing in mind that even though African countries have similar challenges, there's still some challenges that are peculiar to some African countries than others. For example, the dollar rates, the currency, security, and things like that. So do you think it's easy to just trigger a domino effect that, okay, Kenya, removes the visa ban and then the other countries will follow suit?
Thank you, Blessings. We hope it will trigger the domino effect. And in terms of reciprocation, is that as Kenyans, once through our president, we do away with the visa restriction. This brings about the visa openness and the visiting of the countries. And this makes it easier. So if it will be reciprocated in such a way that for Kenya, we removed it, DRC, Congo, DRC is able to also remove it. Yes, it will trigger the domino effect, because given that this is one of the AU 63 goals to ensure that there is integration in the continent. For the longest period, we've been practicing what we call regional integration. And that's why we have the East African community, we have the ECOWAS, we have all those. But it's time that Africa as a continent practiced integration, continental integration, so that now these things are able to benefit. There might be some risks, yes, but they are able to benefit the continent as a whole. So that in terms of even economic growth that is realized in the economies within the African continent become realized. So in this case, then I'm saying yes, it will cause a domino effect. With Kenya opening its borders, or rather its country to others, and they are able to come and trade and do businesses and invest freely, then yes, I feel that it will cause a domino effect. Other countries will follow suit.
All right, thanks. And now, Dr. Iraki, this initiative is a brilliant one, no doubt, and it's something that a lot of African countries and leaders have been looking forward to a long time ago. One of the things that the Kenyan President William Ruto said in that same speech was that our children cannot be stranded to enter other Western countries because of the visa issue, and still be stranded to enter African countries as well. So it's a fantastic initiative. But one thing that we seem not to be talking about a lot is the challenges that we seemingly will face with this initiative. We have mentioned some of it, border security and things that can be done. But Dr. Iraki, what are other challenges that could arise from this initiative, like a potential strain on social services or increased security concerns? What other challenges are there that we can expect?
As mathematicians say, having the no visas is probably unnecessary but not sufficient condition for the trade to flourish. President Ruto's argument is that if you remove the visas, then there will be more trade flow between the countries. There will be more entrepreneurs. There will be more ideas shared among the African countries. But we are forgetting that that is not the only reason why we don't travel within Africa. We don't have connectivity. If you want to use the railway line, or if you want to get an air freight from one part of the country to one part of Africa to another, it's very expensive. The other day when I was taking a flight from Nairobi to Morocco, I had to fly through Dubai. And you cannot get a road transport from Nairobi or from Mombasa to Kinshasa or to maybe Central African Republic. So one way to supplement the visa-free travel is to make sure that we have connectivity. We have roads, we have rails, we have water transport. And very important, we also forget that we don't understand one another. We don't know enough about other African countries. So there's a lot of suspicion about Nigerians, about Tanzanians, about Kenyans. So we need to understand one another so that once people get free visas or don't have visas, they can comfortably travel from one country to another. So I think just because people don't have visas does not mean that they're going to travel either for trade or as tourists. We need to improve those other conditions, understand one another. Let's study about African countries. Let's not be guided by prejudice. Let's not be guided by stereotypes, and make sure that there is enough transport network within African countries. And then free visas will work.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Iraki. Now, and some people will say that this is a good step, in the right direction, but it's not the entire solution. So do you think that this is enough? I mean, this, introducing the visa-free policy is enough to foster better trades between African countries? That's once the visa issue bottlenecks are eliminated, or do you think there are still other things that should be considered to foster better trade and better movement amongst or between African countries?
We consider that, such as you've been talking about security, and I'm not saying that all these countries that are now enjoying the visa openness are insecure, but there are also things that policies in terms of security, and I'm sure our president and our government has already factored this in. But things like security needs to be strengthened. There are also other things like job displacement, in that these things need to be looked at when we invite other people into our country, or other countries invite people from foreign countries. They always come with sometimes higher knowledge and also cheaper labor. So that becomes a constraint when it comes to a population of a country. There is also the risk of overpopulation in a country by allowing other people to come in, because they find that maybe, for instance, Kenya may become a favorable business environment for them, so they decide to settle here. You find that the number of foreigners versus the local or the citizens of that country is not at par, or rather they become higher in terms of the population. There are also other economic impacts. As much as we are seeing that we will grow, there are also other economic impacts that you find that some sectors might suffer because of lack of know-how. And you find that now in Kenya, having the visa restriction open, that the economic impact brings about because of now what I was talking about, the job displacement issue.
All right, Anne, thank you. I think it's important to bear in mind, Dr. Iraki, that this visa-free policy or traveling to African countries without visa is not a new idea. In fact, the AU launched its African passport in 2016, and the idea behind the passport is for all African citizens to be able to travel throughout the continent without visas. But these passports are still not widely available. And this is in part because of concerns about security, smuggling, and the impact on the local employment markets, like we have mentioned in the past. So do you think that this visa-free policy is sustainable?
That's an interesting observation, because we have a very good example that we can follow when we are coming up with a visa-free traveling. European Union, 27 countries, you can travel from one country to the other without visa. And all of us have seen the dividends of European economic community. So one of the things we need to do is to have political will so that we don't become very nationalistic. One of the hindrances to the free visa travel has always been politicians. They are very interested in their country, not Africa as a whole. So the moment we start seeing ourselves as Africans, people have one destiny, people have common problems, people who are better united than divided. There's no reason why this visa restriction, this free visa will not work. But as things stand now, there's too much suspicion among African countries. Some countries see visa as a source of income. Some, as my co-panelists put it, some people see visa-free travel as a threat to jobs, as a threat to status. So if you start moving from one country to another, do not be surprised that some people will be used as voters to tilt the political weights. So I think the moment we stop suspecting one another, the moment we see the benefits of this visa-free travel, I think more people will be brought on board. But the people to read this should not be citizens like you and me. They should be the politicians who should sell the idea that visa-free travel is in the long run beneficial to the economy, to the cultural growth, and to the jobs in African continent, just as it has helped other countries or continents like the European Union.
All right, thank you, Dr. Iraki. Now, finally, I'm going to ask Anne this question. Now, Dr. Iraki did mention the challenges of language barrier as well as bad roads and all of that, including the security issues. What steps do you think that the governments can take? Because it's not enough, like we have talked about for the past, I think, 25 minutes, to just introduce a visa-free policy. There's still so many follow-ups that need to be done. And by follow-ups, I mean tackling these challenges, the language barriers, the security issue, bad roads, and all that. So what steps do you think the government can take when this initiative is being introduced to make it an easy step?
I think the step that can be taken is, first of all, African integration. You see, when Africa integrates, not as per region, the Western region, the Southern region, the Eastern region, the Northern region, but the whole of Africa, once it integrates, then we'll be speaking in one voice. This is whereby we'll ensure that infrastructure is the same, just like Dr. Iraki has said. To go to Morocco, just northern of Africa, he had to take a flight to Dubai to Morocco. But if we were integrated, you'd find that infrastructure would be put in place to ensure that this visa openness is actually working. You can't go there by road. Doesn't necessarily you have to fly. You ensure that, or rather the government to ensure that these cultural differences, because those are some of the things that now, again, keep us apart in Africa, because of even the language barrier, the culture. Some of these are integrated, or there is a meeting point of these cultural differences that are there in Africa. In other words, it's Africa integration in terms of the culture, the infrastructure, the development, the oneness, the unitedness of Africa as a continent. For this particular visa openness idea to happen and to be effective and to be beneficial to these African countries.
Indeed, integration should be a major part and at the forefront of our agenda as a continent. I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Dr. Eksen Iraki, Associate Professor, University of Nairobi. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, thank you, Anne Maina, Development Economist, both joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much, lady and gentleman, for joining us on the show.
Thank you and have a good afternoon.
It's a pleasure. Well, that is where we call it a wrap on Village Square Africa, the show that talks about salient issues and trends across the continent. Do join us again on our next episode, as we will be doing the same, bringing you issues and trends where we analyze problems and prefer solutions to challenges. Thank you for joining. Do stay with us as the news comes up next. I'm Blessings Mosugu.